Is everybody ready? Okay. Time starts now. Jody and I affirm the resolution that USFG should abolish the Export and Import Tax Bank. USFG should abolish the Export and Import Tax Bank first. First is going to be the framing of the round. First, extinction comes first. Extinction is irreversible, and you can never recover the human race. But secondly, it's an infinite impact. All future generations would never be able to come into existence. Third, magnitude, the most objective way to evaluate the round. But fourth is going to be human bias. In parliamentary debate, we underestimate, or in general in life, we underestimate threats. So we should give most weight to this. It looked like World War I, where we didn't think it was a big threat, but then it ended up killing like millions of people. Also, fiat is good. We have to engage in the language of policymakers to actually engage in activism and actually create change. Also, the world is getting better right now. We see the lowest rates of poverty and war, so that means that any type of government action always works. So just like the weighing mechanism in the round is all-inclusive net benefit, so methodology, everything is allowed, but it should be viewed through a lens of consequentialism. First, the background. We see that right now, the Bank of Export and Import Taxes was created in 1934, and it assists in financing and facilitating U.S. exports of goods and services. It gives credits to basically not small businesses. It gives credits to businesses and allows them to export and import, but it also gives credits to like foreign businesses and the United States owned businesses in other areas. So it basically just allows people to export and import around the world better. We see that the plan is just going to be the USFG abolishes the export and import tax in September of 2019 because that's when it's going to be renewed again, and we think that's the most normal means. The solvency here is that Trump is the harshest critic and that conservatives dislike the fact that it's special interest while liberals think it's a crony to capitalism. So we see that there's mutual support for it, and the only reason it passed the renewal test last time was specifically because they found some weird house disclosure policy that doesn't exist anymore. So the first advantage is special small businesses. Right now, small businesses are failing in the United States. The ASAP point is that Business Insider reports that only 49% of businesses survived in the last 5 years, specifically small businesses, but 500,000 to 100,000 average small businesses survive every year, and it's decreased to 100,000 from 1994 to now. But moreover, the Atlantic reports that the reason for why small businesses are failing right now is because of the monopolization and large businesses being able to gain power and drown them out. The links are Exxon, the Export and Import Bank is one of the main causes of this this monopolization. We see that their biggest funding goes to Boeing, which is an airport company. They give 65% of loans to Boeing, and 82% of their money actually goes to Boeing customers. So we see that they're supporting these large businesses. And the link here is that their funding to Boeing has actually destroyed two companies. It's destroyed the Lockheed Airport and the Dan Airport crafts, which basically it funded before, but now it's just allowing the company to monopolize more. But secondly, they give money to specifically foreign companies or companies in the United States that create industries in foreign countries, for instance, in China or in Africa. That's going to be really problematic because these large companies allow these large companies go to foreign countries, pay the workers less there, and are able to drown out small businesses in the market. The third argument here is that there's not a lot of check back. It's an independent agency, which means that a lot of times we see that Congress doesn't actually have a lot of check back on it. So a lot of times these loans are supposed to go only for exporting and importing, but a large portion of the time they don't only go to that. The impacts are first, consumers are hurt. We see that monopolies actually drive up prices 4 times. That's going to be really bad. But secondly, we see that it costs the United States $2 billion each year and taxpayers $200 million each year, which is going to be really problematic. Moreover, small businesses are key. They're better for local economy. For every $100 spent in a small business, $68 go back to the community. There's 13% for big businesses. There's also more research and development. There's 16 times more patents for small businesses because large businesses don't have an incentive to innovate. But third, we see that they're more eco-friendly. 70% of practices in small businesses are eco-friendly because large businesses, again, don't feel like an incentive because they're just monopolizing and have so much money. And at the point where 80% of the funds goes to Boeing, at that point you already are very skeptical of helping small businesses because they're literally going to the largest aircraft organization in the United States. Now, the second advantage is going to be that of climate change. We see that climate change is on a brink here. A rise of 2 degrees is the most the Earth could tolerate without damage to food and production and sea levels. Also, we see that we're on track to 2 degrees by 2050. We are currently at 1 degrees. What does it say, Jody? Quickly.
The Intergovernmental Panel.
The Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change says that the risk of irreversible damage goes up as the magnitude goes up. We also see that the United States is specifically a key actor right now because it's one of the most developed nations, and that it provides about 30% of climate change each year, which means that the United States is a very specific key actor. But the links are going to be pretty clear. We see that there are many, many instances in which this specific industry actually supports people who are fossil fuel organizations. First of all, they provided $10 billion of fossil fuel funding and oil funding this year, and it's increased from $2.6 billion since 2011, according to its CNN. But moreover, we see they create projects like the Papua New Guinea liquid gas project, which allows for them to just increase the amount of oil and fossil fuels around the world. But specifically, they mask the issue. They only give about $10 million to green energy, but say that they're giving money to green energy so that they can continue these climate change prospects. Look to the fact that the only money they gave to green energy was to a company called Solyndra, was shut down in 2011. Moreover, we see that the Center for Biodiversity in the Pacific actually sued this bank because they gave $1.8 billion to an industry called Queensland Curtis that is destroying the Great Barrier Reef, which means that there's a lot of reasons for why this isn't environmentally friendly. Also, look to the fact that you can cross-apply the small businesses. If small businesses don't exist, there's not as much impacts, or not as much innovation. The impacts are first, ocean acidification causes biodiversity life. Coral reefs are dying. Ocean acidification could cost 2.3 million jobs. But third, we see it's extreme weather conditions. Agriculture is being destroyed. I am sick, sorry. Third, we see that climate refugees, 150 million, move in the next 40 years. Also, there's 20 to 30% expected land loss. Climate change is the most important issue because it's an extinction scenario, which means that if we don't solve for climate change right now, we're probably going to be screwed, yeah?
So how much less are companies like Boeing or these other nations that are getting money from the Export-Import Bank going to be decreasing such that you solve climate change?
Ooh. No, I'm saying that there's not as much projects and industries that are supporting oil and fossil fuels that contribute to climate change because they don't have money from the Export and Import Bank. The third advantage is going to be that of economic imperialization. Countries have continued to imperialize according to the Huffington Post through economics. We see that they say that basically they make them dependent on specific resources the country provides or builds industries which makes the entire country dependent on that. This industry, this bank, is actually causing more economic imperialization. The link is they literally cause displacement as the Papua New Guinea project actually ended up killing 25 people because guards had to come in to make the project available. Also, we see that when you have large businesses coming in, they economically imperialize, and that's going to be really harmful because they just abuse the working class in the specific country. The impacts are firstly death. They're literally displacing people right now from their homes. 25 people died. That's a pretty proximal impact. But secondly, we think that this is going to be a root cause argument. Specifically, look to Russia. Because Russia economically imperialized in the Eastern European countries, they were able to shut off energy to them to continue the Ukraine crisis. We think that this banking industry that provides money to the China nuclear project or provides money to Enron, which provides projects in South Africa, is specifically problematic because it allows for economic imperialization, and that's going to be really harmful. So for all those reasons, we strongly urge to vote the app.
Who is $5 advantage in order? Is anybody not good? Okay.
First off is the theory hedge. Affirming is a lot easier than getting a support perception. The advocates to make the first and last speech, they get you create a bias that influence the judge to vote for them in the first place. B support is ground. They can parametrize the resolution in order to exclude negative heads or core double clashes. This means that this is three implications. A support impact turn out fairness arguments because that just corrects for side bias that exists in status quo. B support allows to split the block to us to go for more offense, make the 1AR more difficult. C, you should allow the neg only RVIs and not the aff in order to give us an advantage that the affirmative doesn't have in order to combat side bias. Theory. Interpretation, if the affirmative defends a plan, it must be enacted immediately. Violation, they say it's going to come into place in 2019. Standards, one is ground. We don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future. For example, this kills politics ground because we don't know exactly who's going to be in office or what election is going to happen or what the political climate will look like in the future. This is core egg ground, which is key to correct for bad resolutions, also key to correct for unpredictable advantages or parameterized asks, which is really problematic. And ground is controls the internal defense speed ground or be able to generate arguments. Two is clash. It skirts a core of topical clash because it happens in the future, and meaning that none of our arguments of uniqueness are actually going to be true because we don't know what the economy will look like in the future, which means that this is a fantasy beta scenario you can't actually know anything about. Yeah.
What's the implication of your first theory shell? What's the voters like?
It's not a theory shell. It's just arguments about how you weigh the theory date, or it's like.
Okay, for sure.
Right. Okay. This kills topic education because you don't actually have a nuanced discussion of topics since it's impossible to ground these things, actual things that are happening right now in the status quo. Topic education, how is other forms of education on reversibility? Since we have 4 years to learn every other type of education, we only have about one round to make the specific topic. This is a voting issue for fairness because fairness is only long-term benefit of the debate, and a voting issue for education, for fairness because fairness concerns our ability to tell who they're debating because we can't tell who they're debating if someone's cheating. Education is a voting issue because it's only long-term benefit of the debate. Drop the debate because drop the argument punishes for their abuse by forcing us to invest time in theory. And monism, the thesis that there exists only one object is true. One, the spacing is infinitely rested. In order to draw a distinction between the object, we need to say that there is a space between this object. Then how do we draw a distinction between the space and the original object? We have to invent another space. This is infinitely rested. It means it's impossible to actually delineate concrete boundaries between different objects. Two, divisibility. Imagine that we have a rectangle and we just keep subdividing it infinitely. This leads to a double bind. Either these infinitely subdivided slices have no mass or occupy no volume, which means that nothing is real, in which case you just negate on presumption. Or B, these have a finite mass, but that's an infinite amount of them. That means that they jut into each other infinitely, which is a paradox and can only be solved by monism, whose thesis is that objects can be subdivided, which rectifies this issue. Yeah.
Can you just summarize what you just said?
There's only one object, and then I'm going to get on to why that negates right now.
Okay.
One, the resolution is nonsensical because should regulates an obligation, but how can something like the USFG be obligated to something else if everything's just one object, right? Two, grammatically it doesn't make any sense because it's incoherent. How can something abolish itself? And also the USFG and impact are the same thing, so there's no difference in it. Dissent. First off is business fund. One, businesses lobby Exim Bank and the status quo. They're huge proponents of. There's tons of lobbying money going towards it from Boeing and other companies. Two, there's uncertainty really high now. The Dow is falling really rapidly over the past couple of weeks. It's fallen 2%, over 2% today. Three, there are interest rate hikes that are having the status quo that have gone from 0% a couple years ago to 1.8% right now, which is decreasing a lot of confidence in the economy. Links. One, there are hundreds of thousands of jobs that are directly supported by the Exim Bank right now, which is a massive amount. Definitely more jobs that are being generated over any given month. Two, it signals an broader anti-trade agenda, since it signals that the Trump administration is moving away from trade, which will probably make it business more likely to expect that things like the tariffs that he's been proposing will actually come into place. So it kills business confidence because they expect this to be part of a broader platform. Two, numerically decrease GDP since investment is a component of exports are a component of GDP, so that will lead to huge shocks in job numbers and growth numbers. Internal is one, economic growth is a Keynesian multiplier effect. For example, because my spending is zero income, every marginal decrease in my income also represents a decrease in someone else's income. So if I spend 90% of my income, that ends up adding up to a 10 times increase in a 10 times decrease in spending when I lose $1, which means that small impacts here can have a massive impact. Can have a massive impact on the economy. Two, sell-offs are increasingly likely due to high-frequency trading, which accounts for 80% of all volume. We've seen flash crashes are incredibly likely. In 2018, impacts one, poverty is a massive form of structural violence in the status quo because the economic collapse will lead to an increase in crime, increase in poverty because people won't have jobs, and that would be really terrible. Two, economic collapse leads to crime, and civil war because it will lead to a lot more breakouts of violence if no one's jobs. Three, lead to a diversionary war because Trump becomes increasingly unpopular since his agenda was all centered around international trade, centered around job growth in the first place. They're increasing high tensions with Russia, China, and North Korea. These increased possibilities can be misinterpreted by rogue generals or people that aren't trained very well, or inefficient technologies that would trigger a nuclear war. Next on the second slide. Uniqueness. The Exim Bank finds loans basically by lending a lot of money to infrastructure projects in developing nations. This is over 25% of the project, which accounts for how much money?
It's $2.2 trillion.
$2.2 trillion in developing countries. Two, the U.S. Exim Bank is a huge presence in sub-Saharan African countries, which contain together a billion people. In 2016, had projects in 35 of 49 different countries in the region, finding that's fine. Third, Exim loans are helping right now. There are $300 million annually to small businesses in a lot of these countries, including developing nations, because of decentralization in rural areas. 63% of these people live in rural areas in sub-Saharan Africa, which is really important because they're not getting any other investments from other companies, since it's just not as profitable. It only happens because of government lending. There's also no aid. So this is the only source of aid or economic development. Links. One, abolishing make all this capital and investment instantly vanishes. Two, debt proves that these countries have some amount of credit rating that they can take loans and pay them back, which constrains their ability to have access to future money later on. Next, impacts. One, investment is key to stability because it decreases crime and incentives for conflict. If I have a job, I'm not going to go out and join a riot or a political or really violent protest or an insurgent group because I already have a stable job. It provides incentives for it provides infrastructure for healthcare development and the building hospitals, other things. Two, investment is key to economic growth. It increases GDP directly. So it also creates capital and human capital from people working in projects that are created in other countries, which improve the economy in the long run. Third, energy poverty. This is going to function as an impact trend. The second advantage. It allows things like natural gas and oil projects to be developed in other countries, which sounds like it means more fossil fuel emissions, but it's actually better because things like liquid natural gas are a lot better for the environment. Things like coal and dung and twigs, which are being burned in status quo in a lot of these communities, which means that overall development of the oil projects is probably a better thing because those fuels are much cleaner and leads to a reduction in the air quality emissions that cause massive amounts of like linear deaths from air pollution and respiratory diseases. It also decreases climate change because there's less CO2 being emitted. Case. On the first advantage, $2 billion is nothing compared to the size of the U.S. economy. The U.S. economy is a $17 trillion economy. This is a drop in the bucket. It's probably not going to lead to a very substantial decrease in jobs. Yeah. Next on climate change. Actually, yeah. One other countries are like empirically engaging in behavior to combat climate change right now. For example, even after the U.S. pulled out of the Paris Agreement, countries like China basically decreased emissions a lot and implemented cap and trade systems that are spreading to other countries, which means the U.S. leadership is not key to other countries. Also, the fact that there are already lots of cap and trade programs and anti-climate change programs in the U.S. and status quo, like California's ETS system, meaning that there are like a lot of other the U.S. is already doing a lot to solve for climate change. So it's definitely not like 30% of all emissions will like suddenly like increase. Right? There are other things that are keeping under check in the U.S. Right now. Liquid natural gas and other forms of fuel that are being developed by these projects are probably a lot better for the environment than the fuels that are being currently used in the local communities. Yeah.
So like nuclear energy, like wind energy, green energy is always better than still natural gas, right?
No, natural gas is better than twigs and branches.
Yeah, but I'm just like as a concept, like green energy is better than natural gas still, right?
I mean, we can make arguments against that in the block, right?
Okay,
We're not going to concede that yet. Next on the imperialism argument, so one, this is not unique. Imperialism has been around for like 200 years. There's no one else why it's making it uniquely worse. Second, international trade still exists in the status quo, right? But it's a question of whether or not the international trade is just only capital cities where there are governments that are like really, really urban regions that are already developed, which is where the imperialism already happened, or whether it also goes to small communities. And probably doesn't uniquely increase imperialism much, but definitely increases benefits that the local communities reap.
Are you guys okay with tag teaming?
Did say yeah.
No.
No.
Okay, the order will be first the neg framing, then the topic theory shell, then the K, then actually I think I'll just do the disads in order. Actually, yeah, so start on aff framing, then neg framing, then the neg case in order, and then the aff case in order.
So, sorry to clarify.
Yeah.
That means I have the head theory.
So the aff framing, the neg framing, the theory,
Okay.
then the like K thing, then the disads, then the aff case in order. Okay. Is everyone ready? Okay. All right. My time starts now. First, you want to extend the entirety of the affirmative framing. That means that extinction is always going to be coming first because it's irreversible and infinite. And because at the point where we can't be calculating probabilities about whether the economy is going to be shifting, that means you're always going to be weighing magnitude first. And partly we can't be comparing like all these files to figure out what's most probable, which means you're always going to be defaulting to magnitude first. You're going to be weighing that through the entirety of the equation. Next, on the neg framing, they say that there's a perception bias and aff is always going to be better, but we say first, they have an 8-minute LLC and we have a 7-minute TMC, which means they're always going to have an extra minute of offense. And second, they have the entire block to frame and kick whatever arguments they want, which means you're always going to be defaulting to the affirmative. In addition, they say that they should be able to split the block, but we say that leads to more inference because that leads to even more offense that the PMR won't be able to cover because we only have 5 minutes. In addition, they say that only they can have RVIs, but we say RVIs are key to reciprocity at the point where you're reading an off-hire issue, we should be able to respond to it and you should be able to vote on it. And in addition, you can refuse the affirmative. Okay. What? All right, next onto the theory shell. First is the counter-interpretation. The affirmative is allowed to enact the plan through normal ways and means. The affirmative is allowed to enact the plan through normal ways and means. First, they say that this takes away their ground, but we say that it actually gives them more ground if we use normal ways and means, because that gives them an increased amount of politics scenarios that they can use that are more realistic. We say that you're always going to be weighing education over fairness, because fairness is always subjective. There's no way to, and it's always going to be sexist anyways. If we want something to be fair, we might as well just flip a coin every single round. That means that like you should always be weighing education, because that's the only round impact that we have out of it. Next, they say that this kills the uniqueness because of class, which kills topic education, but we say that being rooted in the real world is always going to be more important, because their uniqueness doesn't matter at the point where it's never going to be happening in the real world. If we're acting as policymakers, that means that we should be looking to topic literature that understands. First is predictability. This is predictable because it's literally what's being discussed right now. They discussed ending this bank in 2019, which means that's probably what you should be doing. And second is topic literature. This is going to actually turn all of their standards about education, because we said the best education is going to be that based in the real world. Otherwise, what's even the point in debating this overall? Yeah, you should be weighing education over fairness, and prefer reasonability, because judge and magistrate is good. It forces us to explain our arguments at the point where they don't have any proven abuse. That means we should be looking to the substance of the debate rather than competing interpretations and forcing us to debate this theory itself forever. Next, go on to the framework thing. They say that there's like they say that basically like this is a moral skepticism thing, saying that should doesn't make sense. So we say that first, this is defense. If there's any chance that morality exists, you should be voting on the risk of something being good. And second, their conception of morality not existing is bad. For example, racism is bad. That's an example of some example of morality that's bad. And third, the government still has obligations, because for people to get voted into office, the government is acting, and that means that they have an obligation to help their people. You should vote affirmative if you think that our plan tax is a good idea. It doesn't have anything to do with the word to in the resolution. And fourth, we can aggregate this cost and benefit of a specific action, means we should always be able to do something. And fifth, true testing is infinitely regressive, which means that their framework gets education insurance. And sixth, the counter interpretation is that the affirmative must defend an advocacy, and the negation must defend not doing that advocacy, which means that like we shouldn't be debating about the grammar of the word should. Okay, on to the disadvantage. Sorry, I don't know where it is. Okay, here. First, they say that there's lots of lobbying right now, but we say that the Dow is actually the highest in 10 years. They say that Dow is decreased, but this is a cause in a lack of economic capital. But we see that, like right now, we still have a very large economy. They say that Trump is anti-trade, but we see that anti-trade is already being predicted right now. They say that GDP would be good, but we see that small businesses are actually filling the gap in it. It supports American industries, because switching from foreign industries to the U.S. is actually going to be better for the United States. They say that this is going to lead to war, but Congress actually checks back right now. And in addition, we see that large businesses hog all the capital, so having small business habit is always going to be better. And they say that this is going to lead to crime, but this is improbable, because we see that nuclear weapons check back and crime decreases, because small businesses support low-income people, which is going to always be helping crime. On to the where are all my papers? Okay. Where's the other? Okay. Yeah, on the second disadvantage, they say that that they're supporting developing countries, but you can cross-apply the entirety of our advantage about economic imperialism. This creates a cycle of dependence where basically these countries are forced to rely on the U.S., and at the point where the U.S. is unreliable, they could literally take away that funding at any point. That means that they're never going to have the infrastructure on their own. That's always going to be hurting the people in these African countries. They said that there are no other investments into these developing countries, but see that the UN is actually supporting these countries right now, and in addition, China is actually supporting green energy for these countries, which means that the U.S. supporting only coal and natural gas is always going to be worse for global warming. They say that investment is key to stability, but we say that private industries are always going to be solving the problem better, at the point where they are going to be providing more secure forms of loans that the U.S. can't just back out of. And in addition, China has a deal with Nigeria right now, which is proving that infrastructure projects are already being solved through countries like China. They say this leads to energy poverty, but we say that the status quo is solving for this right now. You can outweigh everything through global warming. They say that $2 billion is nothing and it's a drop in the bucket, but at the point where taxpayers are being hurt right now, that means that you're always going to be voting affirmative. Next, let's go on to the app case. Okay. Yeah. And in addition, we see that global warming turns developing countries, because you can cross-apply impact on global warming, which says that it leads to heat waves, and that's always going to mean that the infrastructure projects would be collapsing anyways, because then they won't have any infrastructure at all, because that'll just lead to more blackouts, and it's going to be killing these countries because they'll probably be forced to move anyways. That means you're going to be weighing global warming first. On to the small business advantage. We see that small businesses are actually going to be key in solving for their economy disadvantage as well, because we see at the point where small businesses are failing right now, and the bank is, you can extend the fact that the bank is one of the main causes of these small businesses failing. That means it's probably always going to be a good thing to solve for these small businesses, because they can always fill in the gaps in the economy due to investor confidence and whatever else. And we see that investing in small businesses is uniquely good for solving for research and development and innovation, which is key to solving global warming, better for the local economy, and it's going to be solving all of their poverty and crime impacts. anything else? Okay. Yeah, in addition, we say that $2 billion in impact of the government, and we see that economic harms are always going to be far more. We see that a CBO analysis found that the program will lose $2 billion in the next 10 years due to discrepancies in how credit risk is accounted for. Basically, like when the bank is loaning out money, they're risking the consumers, and rather than having the private industry do it and like analyzing whether the credit is actually good or not, they just lose billions of dollars, for example, through Cylinder, because that means that they don't actually care about all the money they're giving out, and they're losing a lot of money. So there's like a lot of unseen costs that are actually hurting these people. And like $2 billion is just one harm. You can classify the infinite harms that come from like not supporting small businesses and from global warming and all those other things. On to the global warming advantage. First, they talked about how the U.S. pulled out of the Paris Agreement, but at the point where we're at the brink right now, and you can extend the fact that the Council said that like the risk increases as magnitude increases, which means that any action against climate change is going to be a good thing. We say that China is actually pushing towards nuclear energy, which means that like other countries are already doing stuff right now, and given that the U.S. is supporting this right now, that means that we should be supporting it more. You can extend the fact that this bank is literally giving $10 billion to fossil fuel funding, putting projects into oil, and they mask the issue. The entirety of this global warming advantage is going to be turning any sort of disadvantage they could possibly have, because that means that like this is extinction always comes first because it's irreversible. Global warming would basically cause infinite damage, because if we have biodiversity collapse, that means that like all these people are going to have to move, the economy is going to collapse, the fishing industry is going to collapse, and like a lot of land is going to be flooded. Yeah, they basically have no defense on this. They aren't solving for global warming, which means that we are always going to be solving better. And in addition, there are projects in Australia which have green energy. Okay. On to the economic imperialization. They say it's non-unique. We say it's specifically bad that the U.S. would be economically imperializing, because that means that with Trump as an actor, that means he can take away that funding at any time. It's going to continue the cycle of dependency. They say it's a question of capital cities, but we say that it's a question of like whether the U.S. is uniquely doing this is a good or bad thing, and that given that it's the root cause of the issue, that's a prerequisite to solving for any of their disadvantages. And in addition, we see that China, like economically imperializing, is always going to be better because they are using green energy.
Order is going to be our framework overview, followed by their framework overview, followed by T, followed by monism, followed by developing nations disadvantage, followed by case. The order you read case was small biz, climate change, and imperialization, right? Okay, followed by case in order. Yeah, so our framework overview, affirmative framework overview, T, monism, our disadvantage 2, which is on developing nations, small businesses, climate change, imperialization, and then base common bottom. Yeah.
So the one after T.
After T is monism. Monism, that's the all objects are the same object argument. Then that's our DA2. Yeah. Is anyone not ready? No. Extend the primacy and recency argument that's internally to unfairness for the negative team. It means that the affirmative team is a much easier job because they get the first and the last word, which means when you're going to write your ballot, you are remembering everything that the affirmative team said and nothing of the negative team said. That they say that we have an extra minute of office because we have an 8-minute speech, that one extra minute of office is probably answering your minute of office, is probably defensive at best. The second argument that we read is that that the block is able to check back for them. The block doesn't check back for them because we have to because then we have to then respond to arguments that were then made in the 2AC, which is problematic because then we have an extra minute. It's just like hard for like this. But you can see the overarching argument that we make that there's biases that exist for the judge, and those biases strongly in favor for the affirmative and the negative team. That means we have access to our arguments, which means we're able to spec the block, and that means we have negative arguments. So.
My question is, do judges flow?
Yeah, judges flow, but they're flowing the last thing first. Every single person is impacted by biases. Everyone carries some biases with them at some point, and those biases in debate, especially partly, strongly favor the affirmative team. That's a conceded level of analysis that Adam reads they concede, which means that you're preferring us on all levels of arguments, and we can split the block. Okay, on their overview, Don't go extinction first, because the first argument is that extinction justifies any amount of violence, because if you consider extinction to be this high overarching impact, you are able to go to commit any amount of violence, any amount of atrocities in order to stop extinction. So that's the type of knowledge that Hitler used during the Holocaust. He said that the Jews are some high-level existential race, and we should genocide the entire population in order to prevent that from happening. That's the type of logic that they're trying to put in that extinction first justifies. The second argument is terror talk, where terror creates extinction first frameworks create this high-level securitization conflict where then people are disincentivized from taking risks, which are problematic because it creates no value to life. Because if you see that everything has some amount of risk, then you don't end up doing things which creates no value. The third argument is that this type of framework ignores marginalized populations who are going extinct, the status quo people in sub-Saharan Africa, who are receiving no investment from outside of this program. Other populations like in Polynesia, where the United States nuclear tested on those sites. The type of framework that they're proposing with extinction first is really problematic for a lot of reasons because it ignores a lot of things. T. You don't meet your counterinterpretation. Standard ways and means for executive orders is immediately, because the president can do whatever he wants whenever he wants. There was no congressional oversight, which means that there's no reason why you should be delaying this plan till 2019. You don't meet your counterinterpretation, which means any arguments that you read on the standards level don't apply in this instance, which means that you can extend across the entirety of the affirmative T-shell. Yeah, what's up? This is the last question.
Yeah, okay, sure. Given that this has literally become something that Congress has to review and pass every year, why is normal means that it's not it started as an executive order, but now it's
No. Executive orders, normal ways and means that they're only subject to presidential review. They aren't a subject Congress might review them for budgetary reasons, but the president has ultimate authority on whether or not the programs exist, and they can repeal them at any time. You can tag team. You can tag team. That's how you repeal DACA and things like that. For sure. So it can happen whenever you don't meet your normal ways and means arguments. Which means you can extend the entirety of the T-shell, voters for education fairness. That's a really clean, easy way to ballot right there. Okay, monism. Overarching argument. This argument is not about should. It's not about the morality or anything about should. It's about the divisibility of objects. So any options that they read regarding that rhetoric probably doesn't apply because it's not regarding the thesis of what we're advocating here. Eventually, kick monism. We're not going to go be going for it. Doesn't matter. There's no external options. Respond. Okay, disadvantage. The main thing that they do is they cross-apply economic imperialism, but then Adam gives you a really good analysis on how economic imperialism is really related to capital cities and the investment that happens here. Our disadvantage is entirely about rural areas in sub-Saharan Africa. Rural areas in sub-Saharan Africa, they lack infrastructure to get aid from the United Nations and stuff right now. Sub-Saharan Africa receives the least amount of aid per capita, out of the entire globe. They have the least amount of GDP growth per year, and the only amount of aid that they're receiving right now is basically from the Export-Import Bank. So when we're talking about economic imperialism, if you remove the Export-Import Bank, you are basically removing the only form of investment that these areas are receiving. This is a lot of the investments that are happening are building things like railroads or building things like ports, which are really important for getting access to infrastructure that brings people out of poverty and out of health crises in these regions. So that's the overview on this. You say that there are other investments like the United Nations and China that are doing things that are better, but those are happening in the capital cities, not in rural areas. Second argument that you make is that there's a tiny deal with Nigeria. The first argument is that Nigeria is not part of sub-Saharan Africa proper. The second argument is that this is just one small country, and we're reading arguments about a whole subcontinent here, which means that in terms of magnitude is much lower. Additionally, you talk about how this is problematic because economic imperialism means you can remove funding whenever you want. That's exactly what the affirmative plan is doing. They're just removing funding without any prior any reason. That's probably some contradictory over there. And other than that, they don't read any defense on the thing proper. You can extend our uniqueness evidence. There's 1 billion people in sub-Saharan Africa that the United States is funding programs in 38 out of 49 countries over here, and it's a huge part of the United States' investment through the Export-Import Bank. And 63% of people in sub-Saharan countries live in rural areas. That means that there's 630 million people that are impacted by the negative or by the Export-Import Bank that are getting development in other areas over there. Additionally, you can extend our external argument on debt payoff, how the United States funds these programs through taking out debt against these countries, which is really important because when these countries pay off their debts, that then improves their credit rating, which means they're more likely to get loans and things in the future, which they're not able to get right now. That's an external scenario on how they're going to be able to advance and grow their GDPs and grow security that they don't touch. We can extend the security and economic growth internal links that we read and how this is really important for growing the country, make sure that the regimes remain stable and that there aren't conflict or civil wars that erupt because of stuff. Additionally, you can extend economic poverty and energy poverty, where the main energy projects that are being funded through the Export and Import Bank are like compressed natural gas, which is a lot better than the things that are existing in these areas right now, like burning like biomass or dung or twigs or other things that produce a lot of pollutants, which is bad for their like lungs and respiratory systems, because those things release a lot of particulate matter, which destroys like causes cancer and other types of things, and is also really important for like mental development and making sure that you're not inhaling smoke, which is important. So that's happening as a result of that. So that's 630 million people that are like living in hell right now, and like it's like made better by the Export and Import Bank and they like that just goes away when you abolish Export and Import Bank. Yeah, what's up? Or sorry, you can't type. Let's see. Okay, case. On small business confidence, you can extend the argument that $2 billion is really nothing. It's a drop in the bucket in the total amount of the U.S. GDP. $2 billion means a lot for sub-Saharan Africa, but for the United States, it's nothing. That means that business confidence does not go. Small business confidence does not go down. Additionally, you can extend the fact that like there read arguments of how like CBO is losing money on that. That's not how this works. They're taking money out from like the $2 billion argument. What happened there was that China like had areas in the northern region that collapsed, which then led to not being able to pay off their debt, which is why it lost money on those, because they didn't make money. It's entirely unrelated to what's happening. It's never going to happen again. Additionally, you say that I mean, I don't know. There's just like a lot of analysis over here that like overarching the amount of money that this is removing is not significant enough, and it's also not related to like small businesses like Boeing and other industries that they say like removing tons of money. Like the competitiveness is not an issue here. On climate change, you can we basically solve this through energy poverty. We probably just solve it at a bigger level because we're taking sub-Saharan Africa, like a huge like amounts of population, and we're developing them away from the main methods that are like creating climate change right now. They said that the United States is problematic. You can extend Adams' analysis that the states in the United States are doing things like California doing EITC and other emissions trading systems, and how there's this huge movement for the states are doing. Additionally, you have stuff that the United States is like China is combating climate change. The United States isn't really key. These are like conceded arguments that we make that means that the United States is moving in the direction of resolving climate change anyway. Additionally, on imperialization, there's like no real reason why this is like specifically worse than in the status quo. The United States is doing a lot of really good things in like developing these nations right now that would go away entirely under the Affirm Team's plan. There's no specific articulation on how specifically the advocacy that we're reading is imperial.
Order is overview, theory, edge theory, overview, case, set. Sorry, yes. Overview, theory head, the first one, then the second theory sheet, then an overview to like the case debate on the disad, the second disad. Second disad proper, then the case.
Sorry, so I got overview, hedge, theory.
Disad case. Right?
Yeah, you have 4 minutes.
Ready? Okay. Part one of the overview is no new 1 AR weighing on the theory debate. A1 is verifiability. We have no 3 AR and 2 AR and can't respond to their arguments. You should not vote on non-verifiable arguments because they prevent the possibility of a logically adjudicated debate. B-Sport is infinite abuse. They can blow up any marginal amount of abuse to outweigh how much real abuse we're able to prove. They did not do any weighing between the different impacts in the side bias debate, so I'm going to do that right now. This is also fair because they do get the opportunity to respond to it, but they just can't make their own weighing arguments since we can't respond. Extending perception argument. This is how it weighs in reversibility, since it's possible for them to just get faster or do other things to overcome the their side bias arguments. But it's impossible for us to do things to like overcome the flow, right? Like even if we have advantages on the flow, the fact that they introduce like fundamental judge bias that valuable you see the flow in the first place means that weighs. Now, this is a couple of implications, but the most important one is that it means that they don't get RBIs, but we do, which means that they can't win on theory even if they go for the shell for whatever reason. I don't know why they would, because they don't even need their shell. On the second sheet, normal ways and means applies like right now, right? It's not like in the future, right? If the resolution said they should abolish in 2019, that would be predictable, but it's not. Also, the fact that they're debates that defunding all the time means it's probably not a very predictable interpretation. They don't meet their interpretation. Can't turn any offense off of it. This up. Overview. The biggest issue on this is energy poverty in developing countries. The problem that they have is that they are conceding the fact that this is a case turn. It turns the internally to climate change, turns the internally to all of their arguments because of energy poverty. Energy poverty is the phenomenon where people in poor countries have to burn the worst kinds of fuels that are like twigs and dung and coal, things that are really easy, things that are easy to find, that are terrible for the environment. These have a couple of unique problems. They lead to a massive amount of particulate matter, which kills millions and millions of people every year as a result of respiratory disease that are completely avoidable. B, it leads to climate change
because the worst form of climate change, since you're releasing the dirtiest fossil fuels that lead to things like methane gas and pollutants that are much worse than CO2. This is the worst form of pollution. Controls a much larger internally due climate change than like a small decrease in than like a $10 billion increase in gas plants. Also, they've conceded that this is an impact turn to their climate change advantage. Right? The fact is that liquid natural gas is a lot better to burn than things like twigs and leaves. Right? That is a lot better for the environment because it leads to less CO2, leads to less other pollutants that are much worse than CO2. Next in the uniqueness of this debate, the fact that the Exim Bank gives tons of loans to people in developing countries. They say that this takes away funding that there's the UN supporting and China supporting, but the problem is that the UN and China are not investing in these rural communities right now, but the Exim Bank is. The Exim Bank is investing like $2 trillion in sub-Saharan Africa. This is a massive amount of money. In contrast, this is a much larger magnitude than the $2 billion of impact they have in the U.S. economy. Also, the fact is that this takes up their imperialism arguments, right? Their imperialism arguments are predicated on international trade control and like other countries' governments, right? But the fact is that this happens in the status quo, and it will happen even without the Exim Bank, right? The fact is that there's always going to be international trade in the capitals, in the richest regions of these countries, right? Imperialism, like economic imperialism, if you're talking, is inevitable. Or if it's not inevitable, it's not going to go away as a result of abolishing the Exim Bank, because that form of trade will still exist. The thing that the Exim Bank does uniquely well is broaden that to developing countries, to the underdeveloped regions, to the rural regions of developing countries. We see there are 630 million people. The most important part of this argument is that these countries, like increasing economic engagement with the West here is not necessarily going to be a problem because these regions aren't politically powerful, right? It's not going to make imperialism any worse, but it will make their quality of life a lot better because they will have access to cleaner fuels and will have access to more economic growth and more economic opportunities to do things like decrease violence and stop a massive amount of structural violence. Next on the case debate. On the impact debate, we'll do meta weighing between the different arguments. They give reasons why they think magnitude is more important than probability. We give reasons why we think probability comes first, but the terror talk argument that Neeraj gives is fundamentally important because it controls the root cause of the policy-making discussion. And the idea argues that when we focus our discussions around things like existential risk, that prevents us from actually taking risks and actually exploring other possibilities and exploring marginalized communities, which means there's a structural bias in the way we frame these debates in the first place. The only way to rectify that is through probability. We should discriminate this even if we don't win that argument, the fact is that we just outweigh their argument so heavily on magnitude because $2 billion is not a lot of money in the U.S. economy. The imperialist arguments are not unique. We've impact here in their climate change advantage, right? Even if they win that external risk comes first, we're still outweighing on magnitude. How do you think that?
So it'll be overview, then framing, then T, and then climate change. Yeah, it'll just be like a combination of both. Okay. Time starts now. They lose around when they concede that climate change is the most important impact, and they concede the fact that innovation only comes from small businesses. At the point where they're hurting small businesses, that means that you never have innovation to green technology, which means that climate change is exasperated. Now into the extinction framing. They say that, extinction has a bad mindset, that extinction causes oppression, but we're viewing extinction through this specific instance of policymaking. If you honestly think that this climate change policy is causing marginalization of groups, that probably means that you vote us down, but at the point where they give you no specific word of how this specific policy and how actually having a better climate change is probably going to be not bad for marginalized groups, that probably means that extinction framing doesn't matter. But moreover, they concede the fact that this isn't policy debate. We don't have cards. We don't have anything that you can actually verify, which means that at the end of the day, probability, exact calculations of probability are impossible in parliamentary debate, which means that you always have to default to magnitude at the point where magnitude is going to be the most important. But moreover, on the discussion of marginalized groups are the ones hurt most by climate change at the point where they are the people who live on coastal areas. They're the people who are these climate refugees, which means that viewing climate change is always going to be the most important for these marginalized groups. On to T, their only response to T is that normal means and means for an executive order means that it's immediately. DACA isn't being repealed until next year officially. That is a warrant for why executive orders for normal means don't actually apply immediately. But even if you buy that, they concede reasonability. That means that as a judge, you decide if the topicality shell is actually a reason to drop the debaters, then even if you agree with their interpretation, it's a question of the link towards the impact. If we have skewed them out of the round so much, then drop us. But we think that when you view it through a reasonable lens, they still have ground, which means that at the end of the day, even if you buy their topicality shell, it literally doesn't matter. So, on to climate change. First, the most important impact link that they concede is that of small businesses. Their only responses to small businesses is that $2 billion is a drop in the bucket. But they don't really actually understand what this $2 billion number is. We're saying that $2 billion are lost because of ineffective loans. We're saying that $2 billion are lost because we give money to companies like Solyndra that just shut down. $2 billion isn't the entire economic impact. We think that the entire economic impact is much larger when they can see the analysis about how small businesses are failing because these companies are the ones that get money. At the point where 80% of the funds goes to one large business, these large businesses are drowning out small businesses. And at the point where 400,000 are dying each year, that's an extreme warrant for why it's a try or die for the app. We need to save small businesses. When they can see that small businesses are key to innovation, that completely turns all their developing country advantage. Because at the point where if we can't have new green energy, at the point where we can't have new ways to have a better world when it comes to climate change, that means that natural gas probably won't be something that's sustainable, which means that innovation is the only thing that we can look towards. At the point where they concede that innovation is decreasing the status quo because of the negation side, that means that you always vote for the affirmation, because even if natural gas is better than dung, in the future we won't have that innovation to create new green energy, which means that in a long-term impact you always vote for the app. But more on climate change. We're really happy that they say that the capital cities are the ones that get most of this infrastructure. The capital cities have the highest amount of people. They have the most magnitude of people, which means that if we are able to solve for climate change in these specific capital cities, that means on magnitude we're decreasing climate change on net. The rural areas probably have less of a contribution than these capital cities, and we're really happy they made that new argument in the neg block, because that means that we are decreasing climate change. They say we only cite one project and that only capital cities are being affected, but we cite a nuclear project that China is doing in Nigeria. When you have a nuclear power plant that funds most of the country, that provides energy for most of the country, which means that at the end of the day, we are helping these rural areas. If you have a nuclear power plant in California, that isn't only helping one city in California. There's only one or two nuclear power plants that power the entire state, which means that at the end of the day, we're helping them. They try to frame it as natural gas versus dung, but they don't look at the framing where we're saying other organizations like the United Nations, like China, are coming in with green energy. So it's a question of green energy versus dung. We think that green energy is always going to be better than natural gas because they concede that natural gas still contributes to global warming, which means that at the end of the day, we are solving that for global warming. Now it's a question of why global warming comes first. Global warming turns the entirety of their offense. When they concede that heat waves and power outages destroy energy infrastructure, that means that even if they're helping these developing countries, it doesn't matter because global warming will come in and destroy that infrastructure, which means that any of the help they're giving becomes a non-issue in the future because of global warming. You always view it to global warming because number one, again, extinction comes first. It's an infinite magnitude. Number two, there's a high probability. We're on a brink scenario right now and we concede all of that, which means that there is a high probability. And number three, all of their offense is turned by climate change, which means at the end of the day, you vote on climate change. Don't vote on topicality. We don't think we've skewed them out enough to actually hurt their ability to engage in the round. Also, we have more topic literature. Search it up. We always are the ones that are probably engaging in how this policy is actually passed. And then climate change turns all their offense and has the highest magnitude. And at the point where parliamentary debate mandates that you have to weigh magnitude first, you always vote for the axe.